Boom. The wind tore across the plains like a wounded beast, carrying a cry that belonged to no living thing. It was the kind of sound that made a man straighten in his saddle and wonder if fate had just brushed its fingers along his spine. Calder Hayes felt it before he heard it, a shiver slipping beneath the seams of his coat, as though warning him that the land ahead had shifted, that some unseen thread had snapped in the blizzard's teeth. He nudged his horse forward, breath fogging in the frozen air, heart tightening around a sense of tragedy waiting to be found. The storm was a vicious sculptor, grinding the world into a blur of white and shadow. Yet even through that merciless haze Calder sensed tragedy waiting to be discovered. Something had been taken, broken, or left behind. He pushed through the drifts, the saddle creaking, the wind striking his skin like shards of ice. Then he saw her, not clearly, but the outline of a life fighting not to disappear. A woman half collapsed in the snow, her braids stiff with frost, her breath thin as spider silk. She looked as though winter itself had claimed her and was deciding whether to let her go. Calder dismounted, boots sinking deep. The world fell silent except for the wind's low mourning. He knelt beside her, brushing snow from her face. She was young, perhaps 28, her features marked by exhaustion yet stubbornly alive. He did not know her name or her story, but he knew the look of someone standing on death's edge. And he could not leave her there. He lifted her gently, cradling her as though she were a memory he refused to lose. The cold in her body clung to him like a plea. She whispered something in a language he didn't know, soft and fraying. He leaned closer, but the storm swallowed the words. Still, he felt their meaning. Do not let me go. Calder wrapped his coat around her and carried her toward town, each step a quiet defiance against the storm growing sharper behind them. Cold Creek emerged from the white veil slowly, lanterns flickering behind frosted windows, doors pulled tight, silence thick with suspicion. As Calder rode in with the freezing woman held against his chest, curtains stirred. Shapes shifted behind glass. People here were cautious of difference, quick to fear what they did not understand. Calder felt their eyes on him, heavy as stones, but he kept riding. He brought her to May Tompkins's inn, the only place where warmth still felt honest. May, tiny but fierce as a winter bird, helped him carry the woman inside. Heat enveloped them, rushing toward her fading pulse. They laid her near the hearth, steam lifting from her clothing as snow melted into the floorboards. Calder stayed beside her, watching her face as though willing her to remain in this world. Time moved strangely in the glow of the fire. Slowly, color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing strengthened. When her eyes finally opened, they found his. There was no fear in them, only a quiet resilience that struck something deep within him. He looked away first, unsettled by the tenderness rising in his chest like an unexpected tide. But the fragile peace shattered. A harsh knock tore through the room. The door swung open, letting in a blade of cold and the harsher presence of Marshal Brigson. Behind him stood several townsfolk holding torches, their unease flickering in the wavering light. Brigson's voice was sharp, announcing that the woman must leave by sunrise. A stranger, he said. A danger. An unwelcome disruption. Calder rose slowly, a quiet storm gathering in his eyes. The fire crackled between them like a warning. Ilara, though he did not yet know her name, watched him with a hope trembling like a candle in wind, waiting to see whether he would step aside and let the storm take her again. In that suspended moment, Calder felt every unspoken mile of his own loneliness press against him, urging him toward a choice he had never expected to face. The room held its breath, the storm outside listening for his answer. Boom. Dawn broke like a cracked bell over Cold Creek, its soundless shatter rippling through the streets as though the night had held something too heavy to contain. Calder Hayes felt the echo of it while saddling his horse, the air sharp enough to slice breath into pieces. The storm had faded, but the unease left behind clung to the town like frost that refused to melt. He knew the marshal's threat had not drifted away with the wind. It waited, coiled and patient. And Ilara, still weak from the blizzard, lay in May's small room with judgment pressing through the walls. Inside, Ilara stirred beneath the woven blanket holding whispers of her homeland. She was awake, though exhaustion clung to her bones like wet cloth. The fire crackled softly, offering fragile peace. Every breath tasted of uncertainty. She sensed the fear outside, sensed how easily fear could turn sharp. Yet she also sensed Calder's presence, a quiet guardian in a world that rarely offered guardianship to anyone like her. He brought breakfast without knocking. Set the tray down gently. Spoke even more gently. He asked nothing of her, not her story nor her pain. That silence unsettled her more than questions would have. She watched the way he held himself, steady but shy, as though used to carrying burdens others never noticed. In town, whispers thickened. Tucker Lee spread rumors with the skill of a man who enjoyed watching sparks catch. He claimed Alara was a scout for raiders, claimed she brought curses on storms, claimed anything that fed fear. The marshal added his voice, pushing a petition to force her out. Some hesitated. Some didn't. Fear rarely needed truth to justify itself. By midday, Calder walked into the church where the meeting had been called. He disliked crowds and raised voices but could not stay silent. The floor groaned beneath his boots as he stepped forward. Brixton stood like a pillar of iron, ready to swing authority. Calder spoke quietly, yet his words carried through the room like warm air in winter. He told them how he found Alara, half frozen and refusing to surrender. Some listened. Some scowled. Tucker smirked, certain courage was a fool's tale. Old Jonas rose from a pew, his blind eyes tilted toward the rafters. He said storms came from the sky, but cruelty came from choice, and a town forgetting the difference was already lost. A hush followed, revealing fractures in people's certainty. Alara, hidden near the doorway, felt something warm and painful bloom in her chest. She had expected survival, not defense. Something within her began to thaw, wounded long before the blizzard touched her. She watched Calder, wondering why a man who owed her nothing stood like a shield between her and the world. May added her voice next, small but sharp. She said she would house Alara as long as breath stayed in her body. A few nodded. A few sighed. The tide, slow as spring thaw, began to shift. Brixton stiffened, jaw tight, realizing the room had slipped from his grip. He muttered about danger before pushing past the crowd and leaving the church in a swirl of cold air. When the meeting ended, Alara stepped into the brittle sunlight. Calder joined her, each step deliberate, as though walking toward a truth neither dared to name. She whispered her thanks, though the words felt too small. He only nodded, softness in his eyes deeper than a vow. For a moment, the town felt gentler. For a moment, the future felt possible. But as they walked toward Maze, neither noticed the lone figure watching from an alley's shadow, breath misting like smoke, carrying a grudge the storm had not washed clean. The air around them held a strange stillness, as if the storm had paused its breath to watch what these two wounded souls might become. Alara felt the delicate tremor of change settling into her chest, a quiet recognition that kindness, once offered without demand, could reshape the ground beneath a person. Calder sensed it too, though he kept his gaze low, unsure whether hope was something he had earned the right to carry. It hovered like a held breath.